Good morning. Happy Sabbath. What's kind of funny about today or how I got to preach? I think I was with Cassandra. I think I don't know, maybe like 2 weeks ago. And we were at this gathering and a bunch of people were talking at the same time. And I kind of checked out for a little bit and this message just came up into my head. It's not that deep, out of nowhere. So then I'm like, okay. And then I just thought about it later. Then again, it came 2 minutes later, and then it's like, this story, this verse, exact verse. And I'm like, okay, then I start writing. And everybody's like, Prudence, you're supposed to be in the moment. You're supposed to be there. Then I go home, I go sleep. Next morning, I see Pastor Bob's email saying, so Prudence, we have an opening for our sermon. Would you like to preach? And I'm like, oh. That's what you were trying to say, God. Okay. Now, I don't know if you guys greeted each other, but can you turn to the person to the right of you and to the left of you and say it's good to be in the house of the Lord? Just to get us a little comfortable. I know you haven't talked in a long time, but let's get comfortable before it all goes down. Yeah. Okay. Luke chapter 10, verses 38 to 42. Now it happened as they went that he entered a certain village. And a certain woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. Verse 39. And she had a sister called Mary who also sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. Verse 40. But Martha was distracted with much serving, and she approached him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Therefore, tell her to help me. Verse 41, and Jesus answered and said to her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about many things, but one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen that good part which will not be taken away from her. The sermon title that I want to talk about today is, It's Not That Deep. It's not that deep. Disclaimer, this is not a nice message. Just telling you. You know, saints, some of us take things just a little bit too far. We talk for the sake of talking, filling the air with words that carry no weight, just noise. We give opinions where those opinions are not needed. We offer advice when we all need to do is to just be present. We jump at the opportunity to give our 2 cents even though nobody asked. And what happens? We complicate situations that were never meant to be problematic in the first place, wasting our time and energy on something or someone who never deserved our time. We want things done our way because we believe it's the proper way, the right way, the only way. Some of us think that we're always right, but let's be honest, most of you are always wrong. And instead of letting go, we get upset. We like to stir up conflict. We like to solve problems. We like to create storms when the tide is calm. But why? We've trained ourselves to think that everything is a big deal. We analyze, dissect, and debate even minor matters, convinced that they must be complicated. But hear me today, it's not that deep. Not everything is hard to understand, grasp, or explain. Some things are simply because the truth is, it's not that deep. Turn to your neighbor and say, it's not that deep. Now, some of you don't even know what that statement means. The statement is used among today's youth to imply that a person's reaction, attitude, or response to a situation is invalid or unnecessary. So if you hear somebody say it's not that deep, they're saying you're doing too much. For an example, someone hurt you, a friend, a family member, or a colleague, and instead of forgiving and moving forward, you hold on to a grudge. But God says, forgive as I have forgiven you. So in hindsight, that situation was never that deep. You notice someone giving you a strange look and looking in your direction, and you assume that they're judging you, leading you to a paranoia, but really they're looking at the person behind you. Little do you realize it was never about you. It's not that deep. You're stressing over whether someone at church likes your outfit, hairstyle, speech, tie, dress, shoes, or the bag. But people are so tuned into the sermon, the kids are screaming at the back, people are reading messages on their phone, or they're busy sleeping in church to care about your appearance. So in hindsight, it's not that deep. We tend to believe that the world revolves around us. We have our priorities, and we assume that everyone thinks the same way we think, feels, values the same thing we do. And we convince ourselves that there's only one right way, our way to get things done. When life doesn't align with our expectations, we get frustrated and think everybody else is wrong except me. And we think our way is the proper way, the right way, and the only way. But Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So why are we acting up? Let me read Luke chapter 10, verses 38 to 42. Now it happened as they went, he entered a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary, who also sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. But Martha was distracted with much serving, and she approached him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me alone? Therefore, tell her to help me. Verse 41, and Jesus answered and said to her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about many things, but one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen that good part which will not be taken away from her. Let me give you context. Jesus was walking towards Jerusalem, the city of David. He was with his 12 disciples and his entire entourage. Jesus was making his way to Jerusalem from Jericho on foot, in the sun, no transportation. It was hot, no food, no water. It was hot. So when they were approaching the village of Bethany, Jesus decided, let me take a pit stop. Let me rejuvenate my strength to prepare what I'm going to meet in Jerusalem. So he decided to go to the one place he knew he could have some rest, the house of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. Martha welcomed Jesus and friends into her house, and you can imagine when expected visitors are coming to the house, you can imagine the rushing around that took place. Mary was taking care of the food, the water, the beds, everything, cleaning the house, preparing for stuff that for the arrival of Jesus. Even after Jesus had arrived, she was still preparing for her master. However, Mary instead prepared herself, her heart. And when Jesus had arrived at her home, placed herself in front of him to hear the word, listen to his word. But that's when problems started. When complications started to take place. That's when darkness crept in. We're going to look at 3 points today. First one being, cut the complications. The Christian walk is really not that complicated. But we as Christians like to make it complicated. We uphold our standard of how righteousness or salvation ought to look like. We uphold others to our standards of how one should look like a Christian, eat like a Christian, dress like a Christian. And we completely negate what Christ has said. Some of us, we really like drama. We like to do preliminary works that prepare us to meet Christ when Christ meets us where we are. Some of us have become so pharisaical in the standards of what a Christian should look like through our lens that we push our own opinions onto others, which really do not match up with the words of Christ. We chastise, we litigate, we condemn those who think they don't got it right, even though we don't even know what's right for ourselves. And some of us have become a Pharisee. Back in the day, the Pharisees were like the top guy. They had the respect, mostly the fear of the people. They thought of themselves as the holiest of holies, the beacon of the light to the Jewish nation. They held a certain standard of righteousness, but their standard of righteousness was nullified by their arrogance. And this is why they had conflict with Jesus, because Jesus never met their standard of righteousness. We say, their hearts were hardened, full of greed, whatnot. We really make the Bible sound more poetic. But if you want it simply and truly, Jesus did not look like that guy. You know who Jesus was? Jesus was a 30-year-old man, young person, somehow had words full of wisdom. Jesus had no kids, but somehow could have said, let the little children come unto me and do not forbid them, for such is the kingdom of heaven. Jesus was from the projects, from Nazareth. So much so that the saying was, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Jesus was not educated. He never went to the seminary. Jesus' family was poor. His father was a carpenter. Jesus was the black sheep of the family. Jesus was the oldest. Jesus' siblings already despised him. His family was dysfunctional. The only one that loved him was his mother. Ironic. Jesus' family didn't like him. Jesus was homeless, constantly bouncing around from one place to another, usually sleeping around trees and gardens at night. Jesus had 12 young people from the ages of teenagers to young adults following around him every day. Peter cursed. Thomas was a doubter. James and John had anger issues. Matthew was a tax collector, so he was supposedly corrupt. Judas betrayed his own friend, leader, his brother, for quick cash in his pocket. In essence, Jesus was not attractive. Jesus didn't fit the Pharisee standard of righteousness. He did not fit the description of the Messiah. The Pharisees had this description of who they thought Jesus or Christ was, but they never discovered exactly who he is. Jesus was a simple guy. There was nothing complex about what he said, but he always had left the Pharisees puzzled because they were used to a certain standard of righteousness, of how a Jew must look, of how one looks like they might be saved. So much so today, this description of Jesus is probably baffling some of y'all because you know somebody who's in this situation like that. You know who somebody has gone through these experiences. Probably you yourself have gone through these experiences. And you think to yourself, they call themselves a Christian? Because their walk with Christ does not match up with your own. Their way of coming to God does not match up with yours. And their way of interpreting, living their life through Christ does not match up with your own interpretations. They do not meet your standards. The Pharisees were so used to holding people to a certain standard. So you can imagine when Jesus pulled up to the temple, starting whipping everybody and turning the tables, they're probably like, who is this kid turning up and rebuking us, thinking they know what they're doing? We have more experience than them. We have more trained than them. We know how things work around here. They do not know what they do, or our way is the right way, their way is wrong. Our way is the proper way, the right way, the only way, and they are wrong. Jesus never met their standard of righteousness because they had a complex understanding of who Jesus was. So much so that Jesus said, "For I tell you, unless your righteousness surpasses of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven." By our own self-made understanding of righteousness, we amplify our voices and silence the voices of those seeking salvation. So many times we dismiss those seeking Christ for themselves, but it's not that deep. So many times we criticize those in their Christian walk because they're not at the same pace as us. But guess what? It's not that deep. They are usually viewed as the ones taking the baby steps and others as seasoned Christians taking our leaps. But how many of us know that the babies are more accepting of the words, but it's the seasoned Christians that are always complicating and fighting everything that come their way, even though it's not that deep. So often we say we should be more like Jesus, but we don't even understand his character. We like to make things complicated. Like Martha, we like making things complicated. Going back to verse 39, it says that, and she had a sister called Mary who also sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. Verse 40, but Martha was distracted with much serving, and she approached him and said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me alone? Therefore tell her to help me." Martha saw fault in what Mary was doing. While she was busy preparing food, hospitality, and everything in between, Mary was sitting at the feet of Jesus. She was sitting down with Jesus, having no care in the world, just listening to his word. And you know, Martha is a person of order. She probably got that from her uncle, Simon the Pharisee, saying, "This is my house. There's a certain way of how things work around here. So I'm not going to let anybody who's just come back home from the streets, not going to let anyone who's always getting herself in trouble, not going to let anyone tell me what to do. Just come and listen, because this is not how things work around here." So she goes to Jesus and says, "Jesus, why are you letting my sister just sit down while I'm here serving you, while I'm here working for you, while I'm here giving you my all, while I'm here, and you're letting her sit and do nothing?" And verse 41 says, and Jesus said to her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about many things." The difference between Mary and Martha is that Martha was worried about who Jesus was, but Mary was discovering who Jesus really is. Martha was distracted about preparing herself by her works for Christ, but Mary understood preparing her heart was more important. Sometimes we're so caught up working for Christ that we forgot and to stop and listen to what Christ is actually saying to us. We do not earn Jesus' love or prove our worth by our works. What he desires most is our heart to be open to his presence, his teachings, and his grace. Martha's efforts, while admirable, were overshadowed by her own anxiety and her own inability to see what mattered most in that moment, which was Jesus Christ himself. Mary, on the other hand, prioritized being with Jesus over doing things for Jesus. She chose to sit at his feet, to be still, and receive the word from Christ. Her actions reflected a heart that understood the importance from relationship over routine and her intimacy over industry. Mary understood the timing and chose the most valuable thing to do, which is to be at the feet of Jesus. Mary understood timing. Timing is key. You know, timing is key. That is our second point. We like to plan out how our day is supposed to go. We like to have certain things to go our way. We like to plan it out. We like to plan our big events in our lives, saying, "Oh, by this time I'm gonna get a car." By 21, you're still you're still taking the bus. You're gonna get a house by 25, but by 25, you're still living at home. I'm gonna get married by this time, but I'm still single. I'm gonna have kids by this time, I'm still have no kids. I'm going to have a house, there is no house. We get so distracted by the things, how we think things are supposed to go, but we forget it's God's timing we are supposed to be on. Verse 40 says that, but Martha was distracted with much serving and approached him and said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me alone to serve?" Key word, distraction. I have this friend, very close friend, very close. We grew up together in the church back in Toronto, and we were like this, right? Grew up in the church. I always looked up to this guy. He was always preaching. He was always doing this stuff. So I was like, maybe I'll kind of want to be like him. And he was about 2 years older than me. So I always looked up to him as the responsible one. We lived in the same neighborhood. We would go to school together, same school, grade 1, grade 2, all the way until I moved to Ndlovu and then I came here. But when I moved away, we talked less, though we still had a connection. You know, the type of relationship where you don't need to talk to the person all the time, every single day, text the person, but you know you still each have each other's back. So after a while, we're growing up, I'm going through high school, and I started seeing a shift in his media presence, shift on his Instagram posts, shifts in his Instagram stories. You know, he's doing well, and I'm seeing like he's actually doing well for himself, like he has money. Now, I know some of us, we really like money. Me, I love money. Okay, but when I say he has money, he's having some of y'all have not seen money, like stacks of money. Like, I've never seen so much money in my life. But how I grew up, when I see somebody having that amount of money at my age, I'm like, something's up here, right? And it raised a lot of questions. Yes, he was about that life, He was about that life. And my intuition came into effect, and I was like, oh, so this is what you are doing. Suddenly, I see the shift. I see him. He's posting new pictures with his friends. He's going to the clubs, my age. And then I'm like, so this is how, because if you know about that life, then you knew that him having money, there was something up in the picture already. So I was like, should I reach out to this guy? Should I keep my distance? Ultimately, I kept my distance, and I didn't want to get caught up what he was trying to be involved in. So not long after, I heard he went to jail for something petty. Now, going to jail for something petty, going to jail is bad in itself, but if you know what, I'll explain that later. But when he got out, he started going back to church, trying to turn his life around. We were all rooting for him, all my friends. He was really trying, but not everyone was welcomed him back. People judged him, whispered behind his back, made him feel like he didn't belong, and eventually, altogether, he stopped going. Even though I tried to convince him from a distance, yo, bro, like, what are you doing, right? He probably just felt unwelcomed. So one day, I remember this exact day, exact time, and exactly what I was doing. And I was writing an essay, and then I was going to work on my sermon for another church. And now my cousin called me. And usually when this cousin calls me, we are already cackling over the phone. Like, we don't even have to say anything. She's already laughing when she calls me. But this time, she calls me and she says, yo, Jobs? That's my nickname. And when you call me, that's not even my nickname. That's my actual name. Prudence is not my real name. But like, when she says, Jobs, and I'm like, yo, why are you calling me by my government name now? And then she didn't even speak English. That's how you know it's bad. Then she was like, Vala my messages, Prudence. That means open your messages. So I opened the link, and then there was this news article, and I see my friend. And when I see my friend, he's placed in the photo, and he's in a mugshot. And he says, man charged with first-degree murder. I couldn't believe it. This guy who I've known since we used to go everywhere together. I always looked up to this guy, always together, has gone down this path. I read the message, my heart sinking with every word. I won't even go to details how it happened or everything, but when you're about that life, it's a simple job for a simple situation. But this friend of mine, I grew up with him, went to church, and is now facing life in prison. Never gonna get out. He made one decision, one choice, that changed the course of his life forever. All because he thought he had time. He thought if he kept on putting stuff away, eventually he's going to get right with God. And you know, after hearing the news, I couldn't help thinking to myself, could I have done something? Should I have reached out more? Was the voice telling me ahead, saying, Prudence, you should reach out, but I kept my distance? Now my friend is labeled as a villain. Even though his actions, there's no forgiveness for that, but like, he has to live with the guilt and consequences of that one decision for the rest of his life. All because he assumed there's tomorrow. Listen, I feel like sometimes when I preach, you guys think I'm getting these ideas out of nowhere, but there's no tomorrow, you know? You don't know if you're going to have another chance to come to Jesus. You don't know if you have all the time in the world. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Tomorrow is not promised. We're all on borrowed time. And when people, mostly the old people in church, says tomorrow is not promised, I never believed this statement until this situation happened, until it hit close to home. Martha's story, my friend's story, reminds us of one profound truth. The only moment you're guaranteed is the moment you're in right now. Don't waste it. Don't wait until you feel like you're ready, until you feel like you're worthy. Jesus did not ask for your perfection. He just asked for you. Come to him today because the time to sit at his feet is now. Be like Mary. You see, Mary understood timing. She recognized that some moments are too precious to let slip by. She chose connection over control, presence over performance. And this was just not any Mary. This was Mary Magdalene, the same Mary who was a prostitute, the same Mary who had 7 demons tormenting her at one point at several different occasions, and some of them had not even entered her at the time we're talking about right now. Mary, the one that was caught in adultery. Mary, the sinner. The Mary, the broken one. Mary, the one sitting at Jesus' feet. She wasn't perfect. She wasn't pretending to be. Mary came as she was, with her flaws, her past, her wounds, and her struggles. She didn't wait to clean herself up or fix everything before coming to Jesus. She simply just came. And this is the part where it hits home. We are all like Mary in the same way. Your sin might not look like hers, but we are all sinners. Don't think because you might not have done the worst thing possible that you're better than the guy on the street, that you're better than the guy who just stole from the bank, then you're better than the guy who just got caught in adultery. We are all sinners. We are all like Mary. The good news is that Jesus isn't waiting for perfection. He's waiting for you. So be like Mary. Look to Jesus. Don't push him aside thinking, oh, I'll get my life together first. Oh, let me do this. Oh, let me get success first. Success comes through Jesus. Don't wait and say, let me get myself together first, because your world will fall apart. Don't wait until your world is falling apart and start singing, turn your eyes upon Jesus. Turn to him now. He's waiting to receive you with open arms, wide arms that are open. The time is now. Tomorrow is not promised. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You don't know if you're going to wake up tomorrow. We're all on borrowed time. So don't gamble with the most important decision of your life. It's not that deep. Just come as you are. Another point that I want to find is you don't always have to be in control. Some of us are very controlling. We like to be the boss. We want everyone to listen to us. We are like dictators. We find dictators in our families, friends, work, school, teachers, especially at church. We have become so consumed in how we ought to serve God, believing that our way of serving Christ is the right way. People want to dictate how others worship, serve, or live their spiritual lives, forgetting that ultimately God, not us, is in control. Martha tried to control Mary's actions, even involving Jesus to validate her point, so much that she said in verse 40, but Martha was distracted with much serving, and she approached him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Therefore, help me. Let me read that verse again. I don't think you got it. But Martha was distracted with much serving, and she approached him and said, Lord, do not care that my sister has left me to serve alone. Therefore, tell her to help me. Jesus was probably in his head thinking, who are you talking to? I'm the one who keeps it all together. I'm the one who provides. I'm the one who gives rest. You see, Martha said to Jesus, therefore, tell her to help me. Why was Martha commanding Jesus? Martha was so busy instructing Jesus on what should have happened, trying to control the situation, that she forgot who she was talking to, which is the creator of the universe, the one who knew her needs even before she spoke. It's almost as Jesus had to remind her, Martha, you're worried about the wrong thing, but I'm the source of peace. I don't need you to tell me what's important. I already know what you need. You don't even know what you need. Just come and sit with me. Sometimes we act like Martha, trying to tell God how to run things. We think that we know what's the best for ourselves and others in church. Nah, this is the way you're supposed to dress. If you don't pray like this, it's not good enough. You can't play this instrument in church. You can't do this, you can't do that. But Jesus is like, relax. It's not that deep. Trust me, I got this. Instead of trying to control everything, we need to let go. We need to let God take the lead in inspiring our input. You see, Jesus is always in control of whatever happens. But when we take this approach, we miss the bigger picture. God does not need us to control others. He's already in control. By focusing and managing others, we run the risk of distracting them and ourselves from what really matters, which is our own personal relationship with Jesus. I think the reason why so many people at the time of Jesus gravitated toward him was because Jesus was relatable. Jesus came down to our level. Jesus was touched in all points by the things that mattered the most to his audience. They felt like he was one of them, like he understood them. So when people find someone who looks like them, acts like them, talks like them, they are drawn to their spirit. Just like the blind man. The blind man could not see who Jesus was, but he heard his words and gravitated towards him. The woman at the well, despite being from a different culture, gravitated toward Jesus. Zacchaeus, who was a sellout, gravitated toward Jesus. They all gravitated toward Jesus, not because of his teaching, but because of the compassion and care he showed to others. This is something the Pharisees did not have. They were losing control over the people, so much so that they turned mad and sought to kill Jesus. Having control can cause and drive us mad when we can't get our ways all the time. And this can lead to our personal frustrations to the point of self-destruction and negatively affecting the salvation of others. You see, the Pharisees were about to self-destruct. And to save their power, they said, let's get rid of him, let's annihilate him, let's kill him, because they loved to be in control. The idea of controlling is about the person who is controlling and about the people who are in control, not about God who is in control. You see, guidance comes with love. Forcing comes with love for self-opinions and self-admiration. Control leads us to a point of not having the ability to make balanced decisions for ourselves, that in fact we make the wrong decisions. The Pharisees went so far with their control power scheme that they took the Savior to the cross, and even as the events of the days passed, they still couldn't recognize their wrongdoings. You see, they mocked Jesus. They killed Jesus. They stripped Jesus. They were so caught up with their jealousy that they couldn't even recognize that they had gone so far into the plan of the enemy. But God was still in control. How do we know? The thief on the cross shows us that there was another plan at work, a plan that inspires hope for the worst sinners. You see, the thief, he was used to stealing, not asking. It was when he meets Jesus that he asks for the most essential thing, more essential than anything that he has ever stolen in his whole life, which was to be remembered in the kingdom of God. The thief, after seeing Jesus spat on, stripped, blood gushing from his sides, lacerated with his back, crown of thorns on his head, humiliated from head to toe, he still recognized the calmness of Jesus, still recognizing his Savior, still recognized that this guy had it all under control. So in the dying moments, he said to the one next to him that says, this man has done no wrong. So then he said, Jesus, Lord, remember me when you go into your kingdom. And Jesus, with his calm and still voice, said, assuredly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise. Jesus was always in control. He was so much in control that even when he could have helped himself, he chose to help the thief on the cross. And he was so much in control that even in his dying moments, the only power he could use was the power to save a dying sinner like you and me. Let me suggest that the dying thief on the cross represents those of us when the church has rejected and written us off, deserving nothing but eternal death. Those of us who do not know the etiquette of Christian behavior enough to qualify for salvation. I stop to tell you today that the only calmness in Savior's voice, the Savior's face, was enough to whisper hope to us who don't quite make the cut to be Christians. It comes no surprise that the last person to accept salvation before Jesus died was the thief on the cross. And the first person to see Jesus after resurrection was Mary, who was sitting at Jesus' feet. These people had something in common. They were both sinners. They were both written off by society. They were both precious in Jesus' eyes. They both flanked the story of the cross, a sure sign that there is hope for the chiefest of sinners like some of us. Jesus had a passion for those two to come and seek. Jesus has a passion for us to come and seek and save those who are lost. Could it be that Jesus has a passion for you? I know that there are some of us who still think that they don't need to be saved because they believe we've already have been saved. But little do we know that salvation goes hand in hand with growing love for God and his people. There's also some of us who think that we cannot be saved because we're not ready to let go of the things that are distracting us of this world. Do not be like Martha, who was caught up in her ego and pride, thinking that work would satisfy the Lord. Be like Mary. Do not be like the Pharisees, who had a big ego and were so prideful in themselves that they could not even recognize who Jesus was. Be like the thief. Don't steal, though. Don't be caught up like Martha. Martha, who was distracted by the things of the world, that she couldn't even recognize who was in front of her, which was Christ. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Be like the thief. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. I don't know what distractions you may be facing, what control issues you're experiencing, or even if you don't think this is about your time. But guess what? It's now or never. Christ is coming. Salvation is free. Salvation is a gift from the Son. It's already paid for. Shaken up, pressed together, running over. It's simple. It's a choice. A or B. No complications. Christ came, died for you, and now he's coming back. And he wants you exactly as you are. So don't try to fix yourself, to carry your burdens alone. Bring them to Christ. He wants you just as you are. He already knows your needs, even when some of us don't even know our own needs. Tomorrow is not promised. Christ is coming. It's that simple. Salvation is a choice, A or B. What are you going to choose? It's that simple. It's not that deep. Amen.